I don't know what it was. It was like the feature. I was like, this is a lot of farmland. Like, I thought we had done that drive before with my mom, years before. I was like, I thought it was way more like rolly hills, and I think you should be able to you see maybe mountains at this point.
John Denver's full of shit.
It was literally that John Denver's full of shit moment. My name is Jon Quijano. I'm a former resident of Bismarck, North Dakota, current resident of Stillwater, Minnesota. I'm 44 years old. I am an editor, freelance. I am also a part-time office manager for an artistic installation company. And when I got my first vehicle, I was 15 years old, and it was a 1989 Chevrolet Cavalier, gray, wagon.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Wait, was it cool for you, though, at the time?
So, I had a younger brother, and there came this moment where I wanted to get a car, and my mom said, I will help you get a car if you drive your brother everywhere in exchange. So I said, let's do this, but if I were to get a car, it needs to be a car that I can use to haul my drums because I'm a musician and I need it to serve my purposes. So
right, yeah.
The hunt began.
Live today's Chevrolet with Cavalier.
Fly the coupe, pop the top, the look is trim, wheels non-stop as the road rolls on.
Today's Cavalier has the electronic fuel-injected power and front drive you're looking for, plus an interior that comforts your very soul. Pick the Cavalier that fits your life and live it.
Drive today, Chevy. Live today, Chevy.
Live it.
Chevy.
And I think we got my Cavalier off of like some farmer's front lawn, which is just the way you used to get a lot of vehicles back then. Like there was no Carfax and no digital means of getting a car. It was like you'd find something in the personal ads or something like that, or you'd just be driving by and see like a vehicle with a little for sale sign on it.
Yeah, just out in the field.
Yeah, and you just pull over and haggle it out. So that's what we got. So I had myself an 89 Cavalier wagon and gray. Nothing super special about it. Had a tape player in there. That was pretty essential. And I could fit my drums in there, put down the back seats, and that thing was my chariot that I took to all my gigs, and, so it fit everything that I needed to do, and then I ended up just driving my brother all over the place in that thing. Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty reliable machine. It had no floor heating to speak of, so... Okay. That was something I always remember about that car, was that I was determined to wear like Converse All-Stars in the middle of winter. Yeah, right? In the middle of winter with no floor heat. So it became like this exercise and like how long was the drive before my feet started to lose all feeling.
Yeah, I got mine on right now. My toes are actually cold. My hands are cold too. I might sit on them for a little bit while you talk. Heat just not flowing down on the floor. Yeah. So just like the upper vents kind of.
Upper vents worked fine, but something about the floorboard air movement was not there. So in the wintertime, and I don't know. I had no standards at all. I didn't know that I should be expecting more out of my vehicle. So I just drove around everywhere with my feet frozen.
Yeah.
In the wintertime in North Dakota. But in the summertime, it was glorious. It was, I got in one little accident with it where I don't know how it happened, but I was stopped at an intersection at Lincoln Road where there's absolutely no human souls in any direction. And it was like a Looney Tune. I looked left and I looked right. I looked left. I looked right, absolutely not a soul around. I started turning right, and somebody bumped into my rear back, like just beyond my rear bumper on the left side, with like, it must have been half a mile of speed. They nudged me like a bumper car.
Oh.
And this lady kind of, I'm like, oh God. And I pull over, and this lady pulls up next to me, and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, how did you like
Where'd you
slow
come
down
from?
to such a barely moving speed, but still manage to make contact with me? And I didn't know where she came from. I actually literally said, where did you come from? And then she was all upset at me. Her car was fine. I had a little dent, just a little love tap in the back of my vehicle from that point forward. But that was it. That was all the drama I had for like any accidents or anything like that. It was for the most part a super reliable vehicle. I'm trying to think about like the best road trips I took in that thing.
It's an 89. You got this. What year are you 15?
Yeah, this is 1995, so
Fairly newish car.
Newish,
That's
yeah.
not too bad.
yeah. No, it ran well. I can't think of anything that was especially bad with it in terms of how it ran. It ran reliable. The tape machine was a godsend. I can remember obviously making all my mixtapes in the car. It would eat a couple of tapes once in a while. That was like just feature of
So you got to like
tape
dig in
machines.
there with like a pen or something, get that tape out.
Absolutely, like right. You're driving along, and your prized Nirvana mixtape suddenly just stops. You can like tell. It's like vomiting. You can tell something bad's gonna happen before it happens. And you can hear the sound suddenly just start to choke off, and you're like, no, 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 no. And then you have to pull over in traffic. Which is something that that was just a hazard of the road. You're driving on rush hour traffic, and then something starts to eat your freaking music, and you gotta like one hand save your tape out of there. You eject it. You hope that the tape hasn't gone too far down into the throat of this player, and you spool it back together and hope for the best.
Yeah. And then a lot of times, like you get that one spot where like the tape kind of bent a little bit,
And that's permanently in there.
Yeah.
For the rest of time. So you can kind of like time and place it. You can be
this is when
you're driving through, and it starts to become how you hear the song. Like there's that one little fade out before the drum solo in Good Times, Bad Times. And John Bonham's getting to that point. It starts to waver a little bit, and you're like, yeah, that's the Washington Expressway left-hand turn right there. I remember that one. And so your music gets a little battle scarred up and becomes a little, unique for your listening experience. That's your version of that song. It's an experience that people don't have anymore without physical media.
I know. That's what I've loved about this too, is hearing other people's mixtapes or CDs and whatnot, the soundtrack for their first car.
Oh, yeah.
Give me a taste of what yours was.
So, I would try to do full albums, which was a good test for the strength of an album, because, your maximum length, like blank tape, was like 90 minutes, right? And which is like 45 minutes a side, so you could usually get almost a full album on a side, but you'd have to make decisions about what songs to leave off.
Oh yeah, if it was too long, you're like, I'm gonna cut something.
Yeah, you're gonna be like, that song that I don't like is going. So then Hard Day's Night would lose Dance With You, because like that George Harrison song is tiring, so tiring. So that song is gone. So you get this.
That's so funny. Yeah, you just changed the album. You customize it.
Right, and you get like a kind of a distilled, purified version of that album.
Yeah, right.
With the weaker songs removed, and then you come back to the digital age, and you're presented with those songs that you exiled.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. There were these other
about
songs on there. I forgot the song. This album is a little bit more. There's some weak spots, but then you get some strong albums, and you have to make the choice of, I'm going to side 2 with this. I'm not going to lose any of these songs. I'm going to record onto side 2 with this full album and then just deal with the 20 minutes of empty space at the end or fill it with other stuff. I didn't really do radio recording.
You are making full albums. A lot of people that I've talked to, it's a mixtape, you know. You're deciding what song is going to go next, and it's kind of an art to it, you know. But you're just, maybe, would you say, like a purist, kind of?
I love like an album. I love a full album all the way through. I like there's something about just going beginning to end, if it's a strong album, where the album is, you know, it's like a symphony or something like that, where the whole thing actually connects together. It doesn't have to necessarily be a concept album, but it has to be something that just feels cohesive, right? So, you know, when I hear one song, I immediately, when it's over, I hear the next song playing in my head. So I just keep on going with the whole immersive experience until it's done. So I always did that. I always listened to full albums. So it was like full Soundgarden albums, full Led Zeppelin albums, full Beatles albums. And it's all new, you know. It's like these years where, you know, I don't know how many times I've heard the Abbey Road album now. Hundreds and hundreds of times. You know, I'm on my 4th, 5th listen when I'm making these tapes. And it's such a luxury to be able to listen to this stuff in the car, you know? So you're just driving around. I always thought Led Zeppelin was the best traveling music. Like, they're longer, you know, like Kashmir is just this certain pitch that just goes for 8 minutes. It's just perfect for, like, the landscape going by as you're driving. So, yeah, like that whole album, Physical Graffiti, it's just these long dissertations. Every one of these songs on that album is just so expansive, and you can just click it in and start driving a long distance. And when you're driving, and when you live in North Dakota, most, you know, visits or anything is a long drive ahead of you. So you just put in something that's a little bit of a trance, and off you go, right? Although I'd say probably the most epic road trip I took in the Cavalier was I turned 18, and I realized I'm 18. I'm just gonna drive across the country and see my dad in Albuquerque. And I took my brother with me, who he was 16 at the time, and we got in the Cavalier and just started driving. And like a day before we left, my brother showed up with a box set. It was, I think, 6 or 8 tapes long, devoted to Jimi Hendrix. And I had never really listened a lot to Jimi Hendrix before that. The drumming on Light My Fire actually made me want to be a drummer, because I heard it in a car commercial.
Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, so it's so surreal. It was, do you remember Channel 1?
Channel, yeah. Junior high, we used to watch that. Channel 1 News.
So what's fascinating about that is you'd sit there in your homeroom and they would play you this like kid journalism Channel 1 show, but they would show you, but they would break like 2 or 3 times in the middle of it for commercials.
I don't remember that. Okay.
And it would be usually like Oxy and, you know, like teen products, you know?
Yeah. Not Oxys, but like
Oxy Clean or whatever it was called.
Right, for pimples and whatnot.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate name for a
yeah, it is Oxy.
Oxy in the 90s. Like, hey, you got some Oxy? Like that was a different thing than what it was in the 90s. But randomly, sometimes it would be like a car commercial for 13-year-olds sitting in homeroom. Huh. And then it would come back and Lisa Ling would be on there again.
Yeah, like Lisa Ling.
Giving you the news.
I think if you didn't have a crush on her.
I think it's I feel like this kinship that I still see her like on CNN. And I'm like, there's our Lisa Ling, you know, she's still doing her thing, you know. And she's right there from Channel 1 days on. So like, what a warrior. She just keeps on going. But I remember one time there was this car commercial. It was like some Buick or Camaro, something like that, like not super exciting. And it's the car driving around the hills and stuff like that. And the soundtrack was Fire by Jimi Hendrix. And the drumming on that by Mitch Mitchell is just elite. It's just one of the best drumming songs of all time. And I noticed another kid in the classroom was drumming along to it on his legs. And I was like, oh, God damn, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I was like, I think I need to do that. I think I need to do that, actually.
You weren't drumming before this?
No,
part.
I played clarinet in the band. That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a clarinetist for, this was what? Probably 7th grade? 8th grade, maybe? 7th grade. I'd been playing a clarinet for 2-3 years at this point, but no, I wasn't a drummer at all. There's no history of percussion anywhere in my family. It's all because of this Channel 1 commercial. And this kid who obviously was a drummer and was drumming along to it, and it just hit my medulla oblongata. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm going to do that. So I went home, and I asked for a pair of drumsticks. We went up to Eckroth Music, got myself a pair of drumsticks, and then I just set up, I'll go sit on like a stool beside my bed and set up my pillows arrayed like a drum kit. And then I just hit the shit out of my pillows. And I literally learned how to drum basic coordination drumming on my pillows.
Oh, I'm sure your parents were way cool with that.
Well.
You need more pillows?
Right. To their credit, they were then I eventually was like, I need a drum set. So we figured out a way to get a really cheap drum set, and I, played on it every night, and not a single complaint. I try to pay that forward. I have a drum set in my house.
Okay, yeah.
And, whenever my boys are making a bunch of noise in the house, that just makes me happy.
Yeah.
So, noisy house is a good house, if you ask me. So yeah, that's how I started to drum, was because of a Channel 1 commercial with Jimi Hendrix in it. But I wasn't a super Jimi Hendrix fan. This song was amazingly cool. And so my brother brings this Jimi Hendrix box set into the car, and we listened to this whole thing over the process of this drive down to Albuquerque. And I've never found it. It's not something you can get on Spotify, I don't think. I don't know where the hell those original tapes are. My brother hopefully still has them. But it was it was newsreel interviews with him intercut with excerpts from the songs. And then a narration that kind of told the story of Jimi Hendrix. And just took you through the albums, so you kind of learned about, the Are You Experienced and everything that went into that. The whole backstory of Jimi Hendrix as this kind of touring guitarist for Little Richard was something I feel like, I know there's been a Jimi Hendrix movie that's come out recently, but I don't think it possibly, it's probably your standard biopic.
Right, yeah.
There's just so much about him that was so... It's just, a tall tale, where he's sitting there as the backup guitarist, just in the band for Little Richard, and any kind of extra licks, anything that sounded just too good would just get Little Richard absolutely pissed at him, because it was upstaging Little Richard. So he was in this it was the perfect apprenticeship to being a touring musician and a live performer, and he got acquainted with the whole Chitlin circuit that was going on, where they were going and playing all of this African-American rock and roll. But it was pretty limiting, and so there was a point where he was in Memphis or someplace like that, some mid-southern city, where he just left the tour and got on a bus and went to New York City and, started playing in Greenwich Village and, becoming Jimi Hendrix. And that's just such a badass, movie scene of him, the guitar in the rucksack and getting on a Greyhound and going to his destiny. And then the later albums, it was really cool to hear his take on all that stuff. It was kind of like an anthology. How the Beatles anthology was such a monster thing. Mm-hmm. This was kind of like a Jimi Hendrix anthology in a way. It just told this awesome story. So that's a huge memory. Me and my brother just out there in the middle of eastern Wyoming and eastern Colorado, just these like liminal prairie spaces with just nothing but grass out there and a little hail in Colorado, and that's about it. Like, you don't see anything of any feature until you get through Denver, and then again you're just through it again until you're down in Pueblo.
Yeah, that really makes a trip just kind of fly by in a sense.
And you're just like, you can just picture it all. It's like a radio program, you're just sitting there like it's the 30s, just, hearing Jimi Hendrix's story. And so, the miles are just cruising by, and we're just like downloading everything about Jimi Hendrix. Like, so much I know about Jimi Hendrix is from this drive where we just sat with his life story in this, 8 cassette box set. I got a real appreciation for Jimi Hendrix at that point. So he's kind of like one of my superheroes now at this point. Axis Bold as Love is my favorite album by him. It's very underrated, but it's just solid. That's a 2-sider album on the cassette. For sure. There's nothing really you can cut there. There's one song that their bassist had to write. Their bassist was like, can I get one song on this album? And they're like, sure.
We suppose.
Just get it on there. And it's like, it's so like sing-songy English pop. It's so out of place on the album.
You didn't cut it off for your...
I think I kept it on because I kind of think it's like hilarious. I think it's kind of so ridiculous that it's kind of fun to sing along with.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
So I think it actually is. I think it made it onto the cassette for just humor value. Spanish Castle Magic is the song on that album. Ever heard that song?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Spanish Castle Magic, like, it is a Rage Against the Machine song. Like, you just listen to Spanish Castle Magic, and it is the Rage Against the Machine song.
Well, good. I got something to look forward to now.
Yeah, and you realize, like, an entire genre. Well, that's the time of, where one song would just build a whole genre out of one song. It was just like an exercise in that, rhythm, melody concept, instrumentation concept, and you're like, yeah, that could be a whole genre, and you just move on to the next track and do another genre. And then he was made stuff about castles. There's that Castles Made of Sand song on that album as well, which is like him rapping before there was rapping. It's such a rad album. It's really cool in many ways. So yeah, it was that was that trip. It was a phenomenal trip. We accidentally went to Nebraska on that trip. We took a wrong turn in Torrington, Wyoming, and wound up halfway through Nebraska before we realized it wasn't southern Wyoming. It was western Nebraska.
So you're driving. Your brother is probably trying to read a map.
And it was an atlas, right? It was like one of those 11-inch by 8-inch atlases. He was probably not at this. Maybe we were. Torrington is a strange nexus of a town in eastern Wyoming. I don't know if you've ever driven through there. It's like on the border with Nebraska, and I wouldn't call them. I don't think they had roundabouts there, but there was just the traffic intersections in Torrington are super atypical. There's not a lot of just grid intersections there. And there's signage all over. And it's probably because you can basically head south into eventually Colorado or into Nebraska. So it's a bit of an interchange there. You can lose your way quick. And yeah, before you had GPS to tell you were off track.
Right.
You just drove for a while before you realized. I don't know what it was. It was like the feature. I was like, this is a lot of farmland. Like, I thought we had done that drive before with my mom, years before. I was like, I thought it was way more like rolly hills, and I think you should be able to you see maybe mountains at this point.
John Denver's full of shit.
It was literally that John Denver's full of shit moment with me and my brother. So we had to turn around, and then we found our Welcome to Nebraska sign and took some photos of Welcome to Nebraska. And then got the hell back down out of there and that's my only time I've ever seen Nebraska, and probably the only time I care to see it. And then on we went to New Mexico, up through Raton Pass and up under the highlands of New Mexico, and yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time.
Listen to the heartbeat of America.
Listen to the heartbeat of America. Oh, yeah.
The new Chevy Cavalier. With all the fun it gives you, it just could be one of the best bargains you've ever driven.
To the heartbeat of America.
That's today's Chevrolet.
God, at the time, 6 years old for your vehicle. Mm-hmm. How'd you keep it? Were you a smoker? Were you throwing garbage all over?
Oh boy, so yeah, I did not smoke. I was not a smoker in the 90s. I don't know how I managed to get through without smoking, but I wasn't a smoker. I had asthma, so maybe that was why, but I know people with asthma who smoke. But I mean, I was I was messy, absolutely. I mean, now I keep a fairly clean car. But back then, it was like people who rode up front with me had to just kind of find some foot room because it was kind of a mountain of garbage up front.
Yeah. I bet in that car, yes.
I didn't really detail it all. It was like it was like a, vinyl interior, just vinyl, gray as can be. Roll down windows. Oh man, those windows. In 1997, we got a historic blizzard very late in the year here. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Was that 97?
It was like
96,
late March
97.
of 97,
Yeah.
I want to say.
Yep.
And it was the kind of blizzard where when it was all said and done, the snow had covered half of our house that you could walk up onto the roof of the house.
Yeah, our fence was gone.
Yeah.
Our cars were gone.
And you could sled down off of the roof of your house, off of the banks of these snow drifts. And it was like that late snow, it should have been rain.
Mm-hmm.
It should have been spring rain, but because of the temperature, it just came
School
down.
was canceled for a couple days.
Which is such a rarity for... Yeah. I don't know if that's any different now, but I can remember listening to my clock radio in the morning at like 6 a.m, waiting for Bismarck Public Schools to be canceled. Mm-hmm. And you'd hear all of the outlying areas where they had 30-mile bus routes and things to worry about. They would all get closed. I'm like, come on, Bismarck, close it. And you just never hear the name come, and you're like, we have to go in and watch Jeremiah Johnson in class or something. They would never have actual school, but they wouldn't call it, so you'd go in and have like a half measure kind of a day of school. But they called it for this because it was so intense. So there's snow piles everywhere, and it took like 2 days to just kind of dig yourself out of your house. And I had an issue with my Chevy Cavalier where it was a bit of an older car, and it had the crank windows, and over time, just as the vibration in the car, the windows would just gradually uncrank themselves and lower down.
Uh-huh.
And so I came out to my car after 2 days, and I noticed immediately, I had a sneaking suspicion that it had happened. And I looked, and of course the back. Only one on the back passenger side had the window had come down maybe that far, an inch,
about an inch
and a half. And I opened up the door, and it was just all snow inside. The entire interior of the car, to the ceiling was snow.
Holy crap, that's crazy.
And I had to shovel out my car, which was a very surreal experience to get a shovel and shovel into your own vehicle and shovel snow out. And then it was like permanently wet on the seats until May.
Never got hot enough to dry that out.
It was just like a freezing, melting cycle
Yeah.
for the next, month and a half. So I just had towels down on everything. What can you do? I mean, it was just those crank windows problematic. So, yeah, I can remember just opening my door and seeing Oh my God. I'm gonna have to shovel this whole. There's no recourse. You just brute force is now called for to just shovel out your own car. So yeah, crank windows. You know, it had a nice. It was like a smaller sized wagon, so it wasn't a big, like Woody wagon or family wagon. So it had just 2 seats up front, a little back seat. What you'd call like like an SUV size of kind of back area that the seats would go down to kind of give you like a full
Oh yeah, right.
Bed, hatchback. You get a full set of drums in there and a couple of amps if you were really economical with how it all went in. So I had a certain configuration for everything that would go in there.
So you're playing in a band at the time. You're the one hauling your own stuff, or kind of everything?
I'd haul my own drums and probably my brother's guitar amps as well, and then any kind of extra material that we might want to try to get in there. We'd usually get it all in our own vehicles, yeah. So, my drums obviously were the most bulky thing. Drummers are pack mules. They have to fit all that stuff in and get it to the gig. And so, yeah, that's where it all went, was in the back of there. It was packed to the ceiling. And, even when I wasn't gigging, there's always, cymbals and sticks rattling around back there anytime I took a corner. It was just a cacophony in that vehicle all the time. And, yeah, life of a musician, just going gig to gig, with all that stuff in the back.
Were you one of the first to have your license of your group, or later?
Yeah, so I was one of the first. The first time I ever remember riding in a vehicle, I was, just maybe turned 14. I was taking my final exams for my last classes in middle school before I went over to high school. And a good friend of me and a couple of other guys in our neighborhood that we grew up in, he was the first to have a car. And the first time we saw it was we'd all gotten done with our final tests for the morning. We had a lunch kind of period where we could go get food, and then we had to be back for an afternoon set of tests. And Cody was his name, said, hey, we can go back to my family's restaurant. His family ran the Tumbleweed Bar in Lincoln.
Oh, yeah.
And we're like, how are we going to get out to Lincoln? And he's like, my new Chevy hatchback that I got over here. He had like, what was that, the Escort? He had a Chevy, or Ford Escort.
Yep.
My new red Ford Escort hatchback. And this was like hard to process. We were okay. So it was the first time ever I had ridden in a car without an adult present.
Yeah.
And it was life-changing. Like, we went just with no effort out there. He made burgers for us. We played a little pool. And then we got back in and just drove back. And we're in time to take our tests. And I just left that day like, oh, man, I had never really realized like how useful having a car would be compared to just being taken everywhere by my parents. So I did, at that point, I started to kind of bang the drum a little bit. I probably proposed it to my mom, actually. I probably said, hey, you don't want to take Nick everywhere anymore. Let's do this. How about if you finance a vehicle, doesn't have to be an expensive vehicle, I'll take my brother wherever you need him to go. And she probably jumped at that deal, and then that's how it worked out at that point. Yeah. So I had to have been one of the first. I can't remember anybody else in kind of like my immediate friend group having a vehicle before me. So, right. And I definitely gave my brother a lot of rides. That was actually kind of a low-key good thing, because we had we drive into school together in the mornings. Whenever he wanted to go see his girlfriend, I'd drive him into town, and I'd go pick him up when he was done. So we spent a lot of time in that car, like listening to music, having conversations in the morning, just sitting there, just like dead tired, trying to get it into school. We would just sit there in silence together and just drive in. And, a lot of times you don't even have to say a damn word. You're just sitting there together. And, now he lives halfway across the country. We don't get to talk too often. You think back, and it's just kind of awesome that you had those, sunrises while you're driving into school from out of town. And neither of us has any energy to say a damn word, but we're just kind of sitting there together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, worked out. It was definitely, in hindsight, a really valuable part of our lives. A fleeting but valuable part of our lives. Because he had a car a year and a half later, and it was all over. He had his Plymouth Satellite, which is just a pure steel machine, And I had my little Cavalier, which is just, plastic. And we would do
that
stuff.
make you jealous at all? Your younger
Absolutely
brother
not.
has a muscle car.
No, absolutely not. Like, those are our personality matrices. Like, Nick is Nick. Nick is going to have a 79 bright orange Plymouth Satellite, and I'm going to have this utilitarian, mini wagon to be able to haul my drums around. All I wanted to do was to rock, man, He was in my band, but it was my band, my band, and I was writing most of the songs. I was getting the gigs together. I was like the task manager of that group. And my little brother was the flair. You know what I mean? Nick was the guy who was, once the music started at a show, he was the focal point of the show.
Yeah, that's
right. He was the flair. He was the guy who looked the coolest. He had that style in his cars. He had that style in how he dressed. He had that style in how he played. And I'm back there on the drums. The drummer is the director of the band, the conductor. Mm-hmm. So the drummer has to be the one that drives the car. And, the guitarists and the vocalists hopefully are a really cool car. So I guess I was, I was in I would consider one of the best bands around. So that was my hot rod, was the band that I got to drum for and drive around. So he had the car he needed to be the great musician that he was. All of it was style and flash and coolness, and that's fine with me. I was the Chevy Cavalier that, made sure the drums could get to the gig, and then we got in there, and then I got to be a rock star, and he got to be a rock star.
Right.
So it's just everybody's got to have their role, their niche, their personality matrix to make it all work together. That was mine. But I could parallel park that freaking boat. I could.
Oh yeah.
I'm a good driver, and I remember one time I had to borrow his. I don't know what the context was. Oil change or something I was getting done with my car. So I had to take his Plymouth Satellite to school one day, and there's only one spot on 7th Street or whatever to be able to park that thing in. And I had to parallel park it with 6 inches on either end. Mm-hmm. 2 movements. That baby was in there.
Wow, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Skill.
Not to brag, but you know what I mean.
I always brag when I parallel park.
So,
only to my wife, but yeah.
So I live in Stillwater, Minnesota now, which is on a really steep banks. It's a river town. And I just make it a point sometimes to parallel park on like a 45-degree steep angle, and I'm like count the movements. 1, 2, we're in.
Nice.
I'm. So yeah, I can parallel park a Plymouth Satellite, and that's
put that on your resume.
Yeah, that's good enough for me. So that was what I did, man. It was a good amount of time. When you're a kid, those phases are so short in hindsight, but they're so valuable. So yeah, having that time to just drive around with my bro before he went off and got his hot rod, that's what it's all about.
Any words of advice that you want to give to anybody for first-time car owners?
First-time car owners, man, the game has changed so much these days. Get an electric, get a renewable, get out of the petroleum game. Try to find a way to, and get it used. Buying new cars is for the birds, man. Just get a reusable reused car. And if you want it to look cool, there's not a lot of cars that look cool anymore.
No, they don't.
There's no, you can go and find a muscle car, but they are probably pretty spendy these days. So I guess I win there because now they're all like my old car. Get a good car, then a color that you like. Make sure the sound system is decent. Make sure there's not any, weird, interference in your sound system, any buzzes or anything like that. Get a reliable car. Go to Consumer Reports. This is Father John telling you right now. Go to Consumer Reports and get one that's super dependable, and just use it. Get out on the road. Go camping. Do some road trips. Get around to see your friends. Be free. Go out and be free. And enjoy independent life once you get out of the house a little bit.
Hear, hear. Right on. Thank you for coming on, John. I
Happy to be
appreciate
here.
it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for getting nostalgic with me.
Elijah, this is an amazing concept for a podcast, and I wish you the best of luck. Keep going.
All right. Have a safe road trip back.
Thanks, man. Although sometimes it crosses my mind, it's like, I should buy a vehicle that, like, expresses my personality better. Although maybe it does. Maybe my personality is a 2008 Hyundai Santa Fe that can pull my pop-up camper and doesn't look too flashy. Maybe that's what my personality is.